Jake and I are here to tell you a little story about how I became an educator. Back in the fall of 1959, I went off to the University of New Mexico to become an archaeologist or an anthropologist. But I soon discovered that in anthropology, I had the idea of Indiana Jones, spending time out in the field. I quickly learned that you didn't spend much time in the field. You spent most of your time in labs or in a library doing the research and uncovering what you've discovered in the field. So I switched over to geology. Then, in the following year, when I was taking a lab, the lab assistant, who had just got his master's and was about ready to get out into the field, informed me that the only job he could find in geology at that time, this would have been 1960, was figuring out the dynamite charges as they built the highway in South Dakota through the Black Hills. Now, that didn't appeal to me. It would only be later when geology would open up with the discovery of major oil resources throughout North America, particularly in the United States. So by the time I got to the University of Massachusetts, I was looking at history and political science with the thought of maybe going into law. Now that didn't work out either because my inability to learn a foreign language was preventing me from getting a degree. So I transferred to the Colorado State University. I had to find something. And with poor grades or without my foreign language background, I had to find something that would keep my cum up. So I thought education should be fairly easy. I had taken an educational course in audiovisual aids and stuff in math and did quite well. So I began to think maybe I could become a teacher. Now Jake is already bored because, what the heck, teachers are kind of boring. Anyway, the Colorado State University had a unique educational program. They didn't just give you 2 or 3 assignments for 2 or 3 weeks. You went into one school in February and you stayed there until May. Well, I got into a brand new school, Poudre High School in Fort Collins, and I was assigned to a social studies teacher. And one of the courses that he had was called Modern Problems. And the third day, he turned the keys over to me and said, "It's all yours." Now, I had been observing the class for a couple of days, and I wasn't too sure if that was the name of the course or the name of the students. In the back of the room, there was 3 guys. One had a cast on his leg, another had a cast on his arm, and the other one had a black eye. Found out they were members of a street gang. Had a young lady who slept through the class most of the time, and another gentleman who seemed bored most of the time. Now, one of the things that the university insisted on you doing when you did your practicum was you did 3 case studies. You had to pick out 3 students and find out about them. I think whoever's at the university had that requirement because it was what opened my eyes and it's what allowed me to think that teaching was going to be a career for me. Now, the 3 guys, by the end of the course, there was one still in a cast, another one with his arm in a sling, and the third one had a black eye. But it wasn't the same 3 at the beginning. They kind of rotated. I didn't do a lot of study about them. I talked to them. And even though they were rough and tumbled, I gave them a project. And they had to report back about some modern problem. Well, it looks like Joey is a little anxious, and I think Jake's responding to Joey. So we're going to see. We might have a 3-ring circus here in a minute. It's okay, Jake. It's all right, buddy. So I gave him a problem about racism. That was an issue in those days. Well, after a couple of weeks, they had to make their presentation, and they blew me away. They went into the history, understanding the problem. They indicated that most of the people in the class were racist. Well, I had a young, blonde-haired young lady in the front row who started, "I'm not racist." And one of the guys asked her one question that shook her and me in a way. She said, "Well, if you're not racist, would you marry a black man?" "Oh, well, no." "Why not? If you loved him." Well, and right there, they exposed the hidden racism of a lot of people. It opened my eyes, not because of what they said, but their ability to understand what they were saying. Now, the young lady that was sleeping all the time in her class did some research, and I found out the reason why. She was a young mom, but her parents refused to support her in buying any of the things that a young baby would need. So she was working at the local Dairy Queen late at night in order to get the money and the funds for her child. So we accommodated her. We gave her a little extra time to do her reports and her work, and she passed. Found out later she actually qualified for university. The gentleman that was sitting in the back of the room with a scowl on his face most of the time found out his dad worked on the railroad and had died in an accident. And he missed his dad quite a bit. But he loved trains. That had been given to him by his dad. So I talked to him, and when he found out I had a Lionel train collection and I was quite knowledgeable about the various cars and what they could do, we had long discussions. That frown eventually turned to smiles, and he too graduated that year. That was my introduction to education. It was my introduction to learning how every student comes with a story. And too often as teachers, we don't realize that. Sometimes we treat them as numbers, all the same, and they're far from all the same. Just like Joey and Jake are two different pups, even though they're from the same breed. Well, that's my story about why I became a teacher and why I stayed as a teacher. Because those stories, I have hundreds of them, if not thousands. Well, y'all have a good day. The weather here in Alberta is turning to a little more pleasantry. Spring is around the corner, though I think old man winter will probably give us a thought or two before it's all over with. So y'all have a good day. See you down the road.